All right. And so recording is in progress, and I do want to let you know that it also records the chat function as well as private chats as well, just so that you're aware of that. Everyone who's registered will receive a link to our Black Officers Speak and Black Parents Speak on tomorrow. I want to thank Molly Blafer. She is our Zoom admin, so her fingers were on the mounts, admitting all of you into our session tonight. And so just want to thank her for supporting this event and so many other events that we have out of our office. Our goal for tonight is to provide space for Black parents to share their experiences of rearing their children in a society that does not value their humanity. Parents will share their views on recent events related to police brutality, and they will share how they support their children and anything else that they wish to share in our space tonight. We want to have a few community guidelines. First, drafts, meaning that our participants are dealing with a very difficult topic. And so people may not be as articulate as they normally would be. And we just ask that everyone gives grace. This is a very sensitive issue, and there's also a lot of emotion behind it. And so we honor however people express themselves tonight. We also want to throw out the acronym of WAIT. We do want engagement. Our panelists will speak each for 10 minutes, and then we want lots of engagement from you all to join into that discussion. And so why am I talking, or why aren't I talking? Self-assess, self-monitor that, and speak your truth. We do want people to be open and honest tonight about what they're feeling. And I don't have respect up here, but of course that goes without saying. And so we're going to open up our time together tonight with a 2-minute video, and then we will go directly to our first panelist, who is Dr. Robin Buckram. After the video, I will read her bio, and she will speak from her heart, not necessarily related to the video, but the video will be a nice framing for our talk tonight. Let's see. Thumbs up me, Molly, if you can hear.
Who said that?
The lady at the store.
That is not a compliment.
Listen, it's an ugly, nasty word, and you are going to hear it. Nothing I can do about that. But you are not going to let that word hurt you. You hear me? There are some people who think you don't deserve the same privileges just because of what you look like. It's not fair. It's not. Remember, you can do anything they can. The difference is you gotta work twice as hard and be twice as smart.
Come straight from after practice. You got your ID? Guess they stopped you. How's your review?
We're good.
You good?
Yeah,
You see?
we're good.
Okay, good. Now, when you get pulled over,
I'm a good driver. Okay?
baby,
Don't worry.
this is not about you getting a ticket. This is about you not coming home.
I'm gonna be okay. Right? Okay.
Baby.
It's not fair. But you keep showing up.
You are not pretty for a Black girl. You are beautiful, period. Okay? Don't ever forget that.
And so now we will introduce our first panelist. We have Dr. Robin Buckram. She is a wife and a mother of 3. She has been an educator for 26 years and received her doctorate in educational leadership and cultural foundations from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro in 2016. She currently serves as a principal in the Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools. Welcome, Robin.
Hello, how are you? How is everybody?
Right.
So I am a mother of three. I have a rising senior. He is 17 years old, Clifton the third. And I have a middle schooler he's no longer a middle schooler. He's a rising freshman, Graham Buckram. And then my youngest is Morgan, and she just turned 12. They are the joys of my life, of course. Like any other mother, I could talk about them for days. The oldest is probably the most responsible. My middle child, I still don't know where he came from. And then my youngest is just like me. So I have a nice little variety of kid at my house. So in the wake of all that has happened, my children have had lots of questions. And so I think maybe the question that probably speaks most to me is how I have been able to navigate that as a Black mom. So let me just say, first of all, I was already scared for my children way before all of this happened. And if there are any Black mothers in the group, then you already understand what I mean. So my oldest got his license. Of course, he's got his license. And so for a long time, I would not let him go anywhere just because of the fear of him being stopped. And kids have a very green way of thinking that they know everything and that they know what's going to happen. And no matter how many times my boys especially have seen things on social media or seen things in the news, my fear or my wondering about my children sometimes is that they don't think it can happen to them. And they will say, my oldest will say to me, "Mommy, I'm a good driver," just like the little girl in the video, and nothing's going to happen to me. And they can be very naive about some things. So for me, the questions that have been coming from my kids during all of this with COVID and school ending, and also, with the recent civil unrest with the murdering of George Floyd, my children have been asking more. And my job is to make sure that they get a balanced view of what's going on, because they stay on social media so much that they eat up every little thing that comes. And so we have been very deliberate. I have been very deliberate about allowing them a space to share, to talk, to let me know how they feel. We did, against some of my better judgment, because of the virus, we did go to a protest in Greensboro. And I think it was because, for me, my children needed to be a part of that probably more than I did. And for them, it was just a lesson in social justice. And it was a lesson in what happens when the people speak, and what happens when we all rally around the same thing and won't change. And so after that rally, one of the cries in the rally was that the curfew be lifted. And so the next day after the rally, the curfew was lifted. And my children ran in to say, "Hey, they lifted the curfew. They lifted the curfew. It worked. It worked." And so, although it was a tiny little thing, for my children, it was their first kind of introduction to protest and fighting back and using your voice. So for me, coupled with all the fears that I already have on a regular basis where my children are concerned, especially my boys, it has been a time to listen, a time to give them a space, and a time to let them be a part of it as much as we could. Because for them, that has been, it takes some of the fear out of it for them, which they were getting. My youngest, what's my time looking like?
You have about 7 minutes.
Okay. So for my youngest daughter, I did not really understand how she had internalized a lot of what was going on around us until we had an appointment at the oral surgeon. So she had an appointment at the oral surgeon, and of course, they're kind of loopy when they come out of the anesthesia. And so she was, saying all little funny things and, Mommy, you're so pretty and my hair is so soft. She was just, a little under the influence of that anesthesia. And so we were driving home and we passed a Black man who was jogging down the street. And in the middle of her little anesthesia and the loopiness she was going through, she starts screaming and crying, Mommy, he can't jog down the street. He can't jog down the street. And I immediately knew what she was talking about. And she kept screaming, go get him, Mommy. We have to turn around and go get him. We have to turn around and go and get him. They're going to kill him. He can't run down the street. He can't jog. He can't jog. And so for me, it was an eye-opener because I did not understand how this was affecting her. And it had really kind of crept into her subconscious more than I thought. And so as soon as this happened in her little loopy state, that's what she remembered. And she started screaming and she started crying. And she really didn't understand it afterwards. But I knew as a mom when I heard her crying and screaming, he can't run, he can't jog down the street, he can't jog down the street. I knew immediately what was happening. And so it is just given me more pause than I probably had taken. We think our children are, the children, they'll be okay. But this time I really understood that this is different. And this is just not something that they can see on the news and walk away from, or we have some conversation about and just walk away from. They have to be included in this dialogue and in this conversation so that we can help dispel some myths, so that we can, help them understand what the reality is for Black children and Black people in this country, and in a way that is not going to scare them every day, but in a way that also is going to scare them every day, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Robin. And you finished about 4 minutes early. You had plenty of time. Are you sure? Anything else? Are you good for right now? Okay. And so next we have Tiffany Holland. Tiffany is a professor of history and women's gender and sexuality studies at Guilford College. She is also the parent of 2 6-year-olds who challenge, amaze, tease, amuse, and tire her out every single day. Welcome, Tiffany Holland.
There. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, so I'll probably take Robin 7 minutes because
Go for it.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Krishana and DI Krishana, for pulling this together. Thanks to my fellow panel mates. And Guilford folk, I see you and I appreciate your labor and your work a lot. And this is just some rough times. So yeah, like my bio said, I have 6-year-old twins, Black boys, and my partner and I met our children when they were 3.5 weeks old. They were in NICU, which is like neonatal intensive care unit, because they were preemies. They were in foster care when we met them. We were their first foster parents. We were their only foster parents. And then we ended up adopting them 18 months after we met them in September 2015. And I say all of that particularly because my children have been scrutinized, surveilled by the state, by the man, by whatever you want to call it, literally before they were even born. Their birth mother had been in foster care, had aged out, and whatever went down at the hospital, which we weren't privy to, CPS called her in like while she was in labor or whatnot. And that is not all that defines my children, but as two humans who have been gendered male, who are racialized as Black and in the United States, it is a lot to contemplate that they've been hyper visible literally their entire lives, and they will be hyper visible for the rest of their lives. Like, that's just fact. Yeah. When I first got the twins, yeah, I mean, like, parenting is just so weird anyway, and like, why people voluntarily do it, it still doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because it's like, no matter how much you love your own parents or your own guardians, like, you want to do stuff different, like, you want to be like smarter about things than the people before you. But I now approach it with great humility, and I cut my mom a lot of slack, knowing that half the time in social, like, being part of their socialization is just throwing something at a wall and hoping it sticks, or even like hoping that something that you said doesn't stick because you totally fucked that up, like, whatever. And parenting is just so difficult. But yeah, that first year, like, sleep deprivation and like how expensive daycare is and how expensive diapers are, like, that was what all the focus was. But then the summer after their first birthday was the summer of 2016. No, not their second birthday. Summer of 2016. We had already officially adopted them, and I was just getting settled in my skin about what it meant to be a parent, and I wasn't as sleep deprived anymore. And then every morning, I mean, I'm sure many of y'all remember it, it felt like every morning we were waking up to news of another Black person who had either been killed or who had experienced violence by the police. And summer 2016, there was the guy down in Florida who was like a mental health therapist, whose autistic client was like sitting in the middle of the street, and there's this picture of the man like laying down, like prone, arms up, and he still gets shot. Fortunately, he wasn't killed. Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge. A couple of days later, Philando Castile. Then there was that BLM, Black Lives Matter protest in Dallas, where folks, the police started shooting, and because there had been an active shooter, and then I don't even remember what happened, like all the steps, but then that active shooter like ran, and then they like went in and killed him with like a drone, like a military style drone. And it was so much going on. And then it was also like, wait, like, our, not to mention just our militaries, but like our police have these drones that can go in and just assassinate somebody, like, and that didn't get as much of the press, but it just felt like a summer of violence, and it was a summer of violence. And I flipped all the ways out. My role as a parent changed that summer, and I felt really ill-equipped for the job of raising these two Black boys. And those of you who know me, I think a lot about, I mean, I love Black people, right? So I think a lot about Black people, and I talk a lot about Black people. But I think about like the constant trauma of being Black in the United States. And I think about how we suppress a lot of that, because it's either like get up and go do your job, or be a parent, or be a student, or do what you got to do, or it's just be so overcome by the violence that is done to Black people every day that you just kind of like lay down and like don't get up. And I want, in my own fear and in my own anger and rage, I want my children to know the dangers and then also live as free of a life as they can. And as 6-year-olds, so I'm radical. Like me and my partner, like we are as radical as you can get. My twins were at political demonstrations like the moment they got home. I used to be part of a radical drum corps, and we had a chant, FTP, fuck the police, that my kids, I'm sure, heard. We have a beautiful but very intentionally radical, multiracial, multi-generational, queer community that are helping us to raise these kids. And our politics have been what they have been exposed to since they came home. That being said, around the same time of 2016, I had like whatever. We were driving somewhere. There was a cop on the side who had pulled someone over, and one of the twins in the back seat. So like barely, like just talking, whatnot. And we had a saying with things like "not nice," "we don't like it," or whatever. Like if they grab something, or whatever. And so like my little 2-year-old like looks out the window, sees the cop car, and is like, "Not nice. I do not like it." And now I can laugh, but at the time it flipped me out at that particular moment, because as radical as I want my kids to be, at that moment I was like, oh fuck, like they can't just go up to cops and just be like, "Not nice, do not like it," like I was doing with my drums and in the protest. And so then my partner and I and the community sat down and tried to figure out how we were going to talk about this. And so then finally we came up, I mean, age appropriate, like we just try to avoid the police and that kind of thing. And later as I got older, they asked why. And we would say the police are not always nice or fair to Black and brown people and queer people. And it all seems so inadequate. It seems inadequate for a 44-year-old like myself to understand what this is. And it is so inadequate for me to like guide my 6-year-olds through it as well. And it's exhausting. But I just have great fear. I have great fear of the police, because like that little video from Procter and Gamble, thank you capitalism for giving us that. But like even, yeah, it's like when, like I'm having to prepare my kids. They're cute as, like they're super cute right now. They're 6-year-old. They're like, people all over tell them how cute they are. And I know that in the eyes of a lot of folks, not just the cops, but a lot of systems, they're gonna stop being cute and start being threats really soon. And that breaks my heart. And to empower them and to uplift them when Blackness is threatened. And that's the history of the United States, and it's the current situation. I don't particularly see it changing anytime soon. It really breaks my heart. And then finally, I'll end. We did not go to these protests. I could not figure out how to handle. The drums made a reappearance. I couldn't figure out how to like do social distancing plus have the twins plus play a drum. So we didn't go down, but we drove down Elm Street with all the murals and stuff that are down there right now, and the kids were asking a lot of questions. And one of my boys said, yeah, like I'm just gonna avoid, like I'm gonna stay away from the police. Like I'm just gonna stay away from them. When I grow up, I'm gonna stay away from the police. And I was like, I really want that to be kind of like how you roll. And then my other one said, when I grow up, I want to be white. And I said, and like, of course, like I was just like, and I said, why would you say that? Don't ever say that. Like, because that's another thing, right? Like, there's so many. Okay, I'm gonna like, I know my time. Okay, there are so like with race, not just with the police, like so many messages, regardless of what you're doing in your house, that you constantly have to counter. And so I'm just like, damn, like I'm as radical as I can possibly be, and they live in this little radical household, and this still happened. But I said, why would you say that? And he said, so the police don't shoot me. And of course, like, what are we doing to our kids, man? What are we doing to our kids? And yeah, I tried to like explain it and just be like, nah, like, but you know, like I'm not very good at parenting. So I was like, oh no, cops kill white people too. But like that's not the like I don't even know what the answer is. Yeah. So I felt like I had a conclusion, but now I don't remember what it was. So that's I'm done.
Thank you, Tiffany. And it's first drafts, not having a full conclusion, perfectly fine. Thank you, and Robin. And now we will move to Molly, who will introduce our next panelist. You all are perfect. Yeah, go ahead.
So our next panelist is Amber Slade. She's a mommy of 1.5 little boys, and she's from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Amber is a career development professional entering her 4th academic year at Guilford College. She holds a BA in political science from North Carolina A&T and a MA in career counseling from North Carolina Central University. Over to you, Amber.
Thank you, Molly. First, I want to say I was 100% not being disrespectful with my camera off. I was here, locked in, doing what I do, crying, pulling myself together because I said, Lord, Krishana done put me third. And now I got to sit through all of this emotion and then be okay to talk. Had my camera off because I had a water bottle on my eye like this, like pull it together, Amber. And that is going to bring me to all of the things. So there's a lot that can't be wrapped into 10 minutes from 4 people, so 40 minutes. I want to pick up on the spot where Tiffany mentioned the word cute. My little boy, his name is Blake. Everybody that's at Guilford has seen me, has probably seen Blake. He is a tall 4-year-old. I mean, if you see him, if you hear him speak, when I tell people he's 4, they're like, no, he's not. And yes, he is 4. But I've honestly never said this out loud, especially not out loud in a Zoom call full of all different types of people, Black people, white people. But I'm a little triggered when white people, especially white women, call Blake cute. Now, of course, it's not those that I know, but it's the older woman in the grocery store or someone at a football game or something like that. And it didn't start out that way. There's like heightened times of it, but there's just a moment where I'm like, he's cute now, but your daughter, your granddaughter, your brother, your son, your husband, your uncle, somebody is going to see this tall little boy when he gets older. See, I'm starting already. And they're going to be afraid. And the fear response, as terrible and outlandish as it is, now when it's not used as an excuse, I truly believe some people are actually afraid. Because if you sit at home and watch TV watch the news, that is how Black men and Black people are depicted, as these scary, darker people who are upset all the time. And again, Molly said 1.5. I'm actually expecting, my fiance and I are expecting another little boy in November. And of course, we're very happy, very excited. But there's this feeling of terror that we didn't even have to discuss. It just came up one day like, well, two tall little boys. That's another person to love and have fun with, and it's a whole other person to worry about. I will say, like, the thought and calculation and how exhausting it is, just all of it, as Tiffany said, the work that parents do to do as we all do, provide, set our children up for success, the extra calculation and thought that it takes as a Black parent is very different. I don't necessarily want my children at the best schools and in the best neighborhoods, because there will likely be no one that looks like them. And I make the decision to not set them up for the villainization that's going to happen. They're going to be the villain in a whole lot of situations, no matter what school, what area they go to. But my goal is to not set them up indefinitely. So does that make me a bad parent for seeing the school with a 9 out of 10 rating? And that's an absolute no for me. I don't know. But their safety, I can supplement the schooling on my own. And we can go to that 6 out of 10 school because it's not the school and the rating is probably biased anyway. I need my children around people that look like them. Now, it doesn't have to be, you know, the 90% Black school, but it will not be the 90% white school. I'll move. I don't know what I'll do. I'll do something, but that can't happen. And that's becoming more real for me as Blake gets older. We're house hunting, and just thinking about the environment that he's in, the experiences that he may or may not have. I was thinking about my own experience as a child and how I was parented from Black parents. I don't remember having a one-time sit-down, individualized, the talk. I just remember it being an experience and understood. And what scares me is, as we try to better ourselves as generations go and go, there are things that my parents saw that I never experienced, so I wouldn't be prepared for them if I met them in the world. There are things I experienced that my children may not, but I don't want them to be blind to it. So if I have to sit down and have the talk, I will honestly feel as though I missed a step for this to be new news to you, that we're different. So what I've tried to do is to have small conversations where they fit right now. He's 4 years old, and we've probably talked about this 3 or 4 times. The first one, and I actually told this story to Krishana and a room full of folks last summer, but I was taking my baby to school, and he loves cars and trucks, and he's very attentive in the car, excuse me, and he said, Mommy, look, a police. And he was so excited. My 3-year-old little Black boy was excited to see a police car. That police car had been behind me for about a mile, and they finally came around me. And I was like, because it's one or the other for me. If I'm driving and see a police car, I either absolutely do not care or just something overcomes me. Like, And that day I was just very tense. Maybe it was like a Tuesday morning. I don't know. But it broke my heart how excited he was, because I know that one day he's not going to be. One day he is going to be terrified when he sees a police car. When he hears the word police, if he sees their presence. And that innocence is going to be taken away. And there's nothing I can do about it. It's the helplessness that I feel gets most of us, especially as parents, because we do as much as we can to provide and to prepare. But with this, there's only so far you can go. There's only so far you can go. There's only so much you can say. There's only so much you can do. And there's a conversation, excuse me again. There's a conversation that I see on social media a lot of parents changing the talk from here's all the things that you're supposed to do, because it's being shown. No matter what you do, no matter how nice you are, no matter what your name is, no matter what your degree is in, no matter what neighborhood you're in, the clothes you have on, the neighborhood, you can be victimized. So there's a lot of folks who have gotten away from that and are just telling their children, please just make it home. And that is the nice version, in my opinion, of saying you might have to negotiate with yourself and just make the decision to allow them to disrespect you, allow them to harm you. Just enough, like don't resist, don't talk back, just so you can come home. Now, I don't know if I have the heart to say that. Maybe I will when my little black boys are tall and they actually look like, quote unquote, a threat. I feel like that's every adult's decision to make. And I don't even know if I'm using this term right, but Krishana said this probably 2 years ago, the first time I heard her say that we all have to make certain negotiations. And if you don't mind me calling you out, but her name is Krishana. It's not Chris, it's not Shauna, it's Krishana. And that is one negotiation she is not willing to make. And that is her decision as a grown-up. If my children, who will always be my children, but will one day be adults, if they make the decision to not just take it, allow the disrespect, allow the harm, and they don't make it home, it's still not their fault. It's still not their fault. I don't know what that is going to look like, really balancing their fear and the truth. I don't want my children to be so green, as you said, as far as not expecting things, because I'm glad that your son, or I'm sorry, I don't remember if you said it was your son or your daughter, that said, oh, I'm a good driver. And in your head, you're like, baby, that is not even what I mean. But bless your heart that that's what you think, because that's all that should matter. And then we have to be the ones to break that and say, well, actually, that doesn't matter. And here's why. The closest talk I remember having was with my dad. And I didn't drive. I did not get my license until I was 23 years old. I was just afraid. I lived in Pennsylvania. I didn't want to drive. All of my friends had cars. It just wasn't a priority for me. But he would say to me, you don't just get in anybody's car. It was one time, I think somebody dropped me off and he happened to be sitting on the porch. I literally got in trouble because I got dropped off. I was trying to save him gas, but he said, that's not what we talked about. I don't know who that is. You don't know what they have in their car. And just because they are getting pulled over, you could be victimized. And at the time, I didn't get it. I just thought he was being dramatic. I thought he was being a dad. I was, 16, 17 years old. And I'm like, I just tried to save you. I was upset that he was upset. And then I got it. Like, you can make all the right choices. Every last choice you make can be the right one, and it can still be you. And then that wraps back around to the helplessness. And I am a person of faith. I do believe in, that what everything is going to be is already done, and there's only so much we can do. I try really, really hard to not get lost in fear, but still know that I live in a world where there are worldly people and things can happen. And we try to prepare as much as we can. I do not walk around and will not teach my children to walk around in oblivion, because we don't have control over anything. Yes, we do. We absolutely do. And we're going to control as much as we can and then move on from there, because, again, It doesn't matter what you wear. Doesn't matter how you speak to them. If you meet the wrong cop, you're going to have a problem. By the time I was 21 years old, I had 2 guns pointed at me, both by police. Once for walking with a group of friends back to campus my freshman year. We had actually missed a bus. So we walked from the depot to A&T and it started raining. So we put on our hoods. We're like, it's almost a light brisk jog / quick walk. And cop car. Another cop car. Guns out. That could have ended completely differently. Second time, no, we were absolutely not doing the right thing. You know what we were doing? At 21 years old, we had marijuana in the car. We were excited. We were out. We did something dumb because kids do dumb things sometimes. We were pulled over, 4 of us in a car, gun out in the middle of Atlanta. So you know Harrisburg, actually new to Greensboro, Amber is terrified. Like, this was probably 2 weeks after Trayvon Martin. And I remember being in the back of the car, hands in the air, and I wouldn't move. And he asked us for our ID, and here I am. The same person you see now is very similar to 21-year-old Amber. I'm explaining to him, I have an ID, but it's a state ID because I don't drive. And it's a temporary one, so I'm trying to beg this man to not think it's fake. I'm ready to show him all this stuff, and he's like, well, I need you to get it. I don't like purses. My ID is in my back pocket. And I was terrified to reach into my back pocket. That was me, Amber, 21-year-old girl. What happens when that's my tall 19-year-old son? If that's him, no matter why they get pulled over. There's so much that we can't control, so much that we know will happen. Kids are going to be kids. They're going to have fun. They're going to make their decisions. And all we can do is try our best to walk them through it until it's on them to make those decisions. And they're in those situations by themselves. I think the last thing I'll say is you're always prepared, like I said, to prepare things for your children and have things ready for them and provide for them. But that protection piece comes out. And I'm actually co-parenting. I'm co-parenting with, my Blake's dad. And he comes from a family that I trust. I trust him. But I have all these fears, and knowing that there will be times where I'm not 100% sure of my child's whereabouts. Now, I know his dad will know. But I'm picturing Amber 13 years from now, not 100% sure where my child is on a Friday night at 10 o'clock. I can't even fathom that right now. Cannot even, for the same reasons any parent would be afraid. But add on top of that, he will likely be a very tall brown boy out. And I need to, as my grandmother would say, lay eyes on you to make sure you're okay. So I see lots of FaceTimes and trust because I love you. I honestly do not care where you're at, but we're going to have this location on because I need to know where you are. And I'll stop there because I can keep going.
Thank you so much, Amber. Thank you. And Barbara, we will introduce our last panelist and then any engagement from the audience. We are going to go until about 7:15 or so. And so maybe a little longer if needed, but after Antoine, any engagement from you, we would welcome that. Okay, Barbara.
Thank you, and thank you, panelists. And last but not least, I'm happy to introduce my good colleague, Antoine Williams. He is an assistant professor of art at Guilford College, and he is also an interdisciplinary artist whose practice investigates cultural identity through exploring systems of power. Thank you, and welcome, Antoine.
Oh, thanks, Barbara. Thanks, Krishana, for everything. And I appreciate the first drafts rule because I'm probably going to stumble through this, And so bear with me for the rambling and pausing and stuff, because I'm trying to collect my thoughts. Yeah, I have a daughter, Manali. She's 8 years old. She's, you know, she's this really inquisitive, like bright little girl who she wants to be friends with everyone. She thinks like the world is this like loving place, and trying to like, it's just tough. Like, it's weird. Like, I'm seeing her start to realize that it isn't. And not just, I mean, we all realize that, but I'm seeing her realize it isn't because she's Black and because she's, you know, identifies as a girl. And like, that is like even tougher, right? That like, it's not just that like, hey, people are mean, but people are mean for these specific reasons. And, you know, I don't, I don't want that light to go out. So that's just tough. So it's interesting to hear Rob and Tiffany and Amber talk about their sons. It's funny because like everything you're saying, like that is just taking me back to like the 80s and 90s. Like I really do remember, like I remember being, hold up, I don't know if it'll pop up, but like I remember being that guy. I remember that. If you notice, I got a sheriff's gun on and I got a little car. I don't know if those are Superman pajamas or not, but that was me, right? You know, I always wanted to be the sheriff. I always wanted to be the cowboy because, you know, they were cool, I guess, right? And, you know, I literally remember that point where people stopped looking at me as that little kid and I became a threat. You know, I worked at Pizza Hut and I would go to the drive-through window and I would see older white women. Like I saw like just fear. I remember walking into a store and being followed around. I remember cops, like so many interactions with cops. You know, and it's not something that people, I mean, you know about it, right? But you know, I didn't have someone to sit me down and like to do the talk. That's like interesting because no one had to introduce me to racism. Like it was there, right? Like you were very much aware of it. But I do remember like this world suddenly shifting and saying like, you're not a person anymore. You're something else. And so I know that the way I raise, not just me, but my wife and I, but like, but the way I raise my daughter is definitely influenced with like my relationship with like cops and the criminal justice system. And like, you know, at every point in my life, I've had interactions with cops. You know, as a teenager, as an undergrad in college, post undergrad, grad school, and even now as a professor. So before I get into that, there's a poem, a spoken word poem that like I heard a few years ago and it always stuck with me. And one of the lines out of the poem, I don't remember it verbatim, but to paraphrase, the guy went, I wrote it down. When I see police in my neighborhood, I get the same feeling as New Yorkers when they see low-flying planes after 9/11. Like, and that is so true. Because like when I'm driving, like as a 40-year-old man, when I'm driving, if I see a cop, I have like an involuntary physical reaction. Like I get like that feeling in my stomach. And I almost, it's akin to, I feel like prey. And I feel like the police is like the lion or the jaguar. And no matter where I am, I'm being stalked. Like the police is coming after me. And I just get really paranoid and I get this sense of anxiety. And I can't take my eyes off that cop until that cop is out of sight, right? And it's you know, and it's because, you know, my entire life, right, like constantly being pursued by cops, right, and being in undergrad and having, you know, like leaving for the weekend and taking luggage from my house to my car and then being accused of like stealing luggage out of like my own house, right? I remember being in Charlotte and black guy killed a cop, and like cops took revenge. Like we got stopped all the time. Like, and this was like common. We didn't even think twice about it. So even in grad school, like, you know, being stopped on campus and thinking that people think I'm breaking into, you know, my studio, and then not believing that I'm a grad student, because that was impossible, right? So no matter at what point in my career, of my life, right, having these like really negative interactions with cops, so I just learned to avoid cops and just not trust the institution. And so that definitely plays a role into like how I raise Manali, right? Right. So like the whole like George Floyd and all of this, like none of it's new to me, right? Like and I'm happy there's this moment where people are having a conversation, but like this is you know, unfortunately, like hearing these stories is normal, whether it's, you know, broadcast, you know, people hear about it, or it's just about somebody, you know, on the block that got killed, right? That for my entire life, that's been like a common thing. And so for my daughter, we've normalized talking about race and racism. Maybe she's 8 years old now. Maybe since she was probably 4 or 5, we've had these conversations about race. You know, granted, you can't, you know, like you have to say it in a way that makes sense to her, but like we very much normalize, you know, how to, you know, what is going on, right? Like, you know, people are going to treat you differently, right? And it's not you, it's them. And even, you know, and as she gets older and she understands that she can see how she's treated. She sees how, like, you know, just as like most of us who are Black or people of color, like you can see that difference. And then, you know, there's like my wife works in early childhood education. She despises how oftentimes racism is talked about in those areas. And we had a conversation recently. So oftentimes it's talked as if, oh, like if there's a little Black kid and a white kid and they're nice to each other, that stops racism. And it's like, no, that's not it, right? Has nothing to do with how nice you are. And we realized that like a lot of adults haven't progressed from that stage. They still think it's the same thing. And so we talked to her about, you know, people are going to treat you differently. It has nothing to do whether they're, whether, you know, what you do, right? She has friends at school who are white, and we have conversations that, you know, yeah, even your little white friend, she's going to have like a different experience to you. Even though she likes you, she can still do things to harm you as a white person, right? And you have to be, and she might not even realize it. So that video that Krishana showed with the all of those like little scenes, the one that stuck out to me the most is the girl going to space camp, and that so all of those other ones, people actively did things to the kids, but in that one, those little white girls didn't do anything. That little Black girl already understood like institutional race. She probably couldn't articulate it, but she understood that it was there, right? And she's having to learn how to navigate that. And I feel like that's what, you know, like as a parent, you want to protect your kid, but you realize that you can't always do that, and they have to like navigate these things themselves. And then also, what I really I've been struggling with a lot lately is America doesn't see Black people as human, right? And we hear cases about, you know, like Trayvon Martin and Philando Castile and George Floyd, but I'm raising a little girl, and like people don't really care about Black women, and not just like America, Black people oftentimes don't care about Black women, right? And so, you know, yeah, like if like I get shot by the cops, it's on the news or whatever, but oftentimes when Black women, the same thing happens, it goes overlooked for, you know, and then you have Black people who will then, because it's not a Black man, they kind of like don't really, it's not as big of a deal. And so having to kind of navigate that and to like have her understand, like, yeah, as a, you know, as a Black person, people are going to treat you differently, but also, you know, because you're a Black girl, you know, and, you know, when you grow up, you may identify as a Black woman. And then even then, like you're going to have to deal with that even that entirely other like aspect of this, and like having her to navigate both of those at the same time, it's tough because you're trying to explain it to an 8-year-old, and I feel as if she understands, but you know, you kind of want to be there, but it's hard to. So I don't know how much time I have left, but where I'm at.
About 2 minutes.
I'll try to say this quickly. So one time, like at the beginning of this year, she was saying to her mother and I that like my teacher doesn't call on me, but she calls on me, but she kind of ignores me, but she calls on me. And we're like, well, will you raise your hand? Does she call on you? And she's like, yeah, but sometimes she doesn't. And we really didn't understand. And she was really stressed out. And my daughter has like really bad anxiety, right? And so we have to be really careful how we talk about these issues, even though we talk about them all the time. And she says, she's like, we really didn't understand what we were saying because she was like, well, she does call on you. And we're like, well, she can't call on you every time. But anyway, so we went to talk to her teacher, and we was like, well, you know, Manali feels as if she's getting ignored. And like, and we had a conversation. She was like, oh, well, you know, I call Manali all the time, but I would try to do better. And so we didn't, you know, we felt like it would at least it was getting better. So the last week of this semester, obviously students are home, but now they had a presentation, and I was in the kitchen with her, like working on something, and I saw that what she was talking about, like her teacher, who is this white woman, whenever little white kids or little white boys specifically, she gave them so much praise. She told them they were smart. She gave them all of this attention for doing the exact same thing that the black kids in her class were doing, right? And like, you know, like, oh, Jason, you're so amazing, you're so awesome. And then, you know, Manali, okay, that's great, whatever. And like this little girl, she probably couldn't articulate that, but she saw it and she knew what it was. And her mother and I had to go back and say, okay, we get it. We're sorry we didn't understand. And that like your teacher hurt you, even though she doesn't realize she's doing that. And there are going to be people who intentionally hurt you, and there are going to be people who don't realize it. And you unfortunately have to know how to navigate that. And like, we're here for you, but it sucks because like we're not with her all the time. And I know most of you understand that, like, you know, how it feels to be in that space where you have to navigate that. But then even with that, like just her trying to navigate all these systems as this like black person and this woman, and it's tough. And I don't, like Tiffany said, like I don't know, parenting's hard and I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't know. That's all I have. No.
Yeah. That's real. That's real talk. Yeah. So we want to thank our panelists, Robin, Tiffany, Amber, and Antoine, for sharing on a very different. I'm a parent too, and this is real. This is so real. And so I see that Katrina Jackson has her hand raised. Go for it, Katrina. You're muted. There you go.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
So as I was listening, I was driving home from work, just got home not too long ago. And there are two experiences I've had recently that I think really detail, like, I guess, the feelings that I have trouble with regarding this. And I'm really curious to know if there's other participants who have experienced this or have some of these same feelings that I have that really challenge me. So the first thing is, you know, I am biracial. My father is white and my mother is black. So one thing I've had a hard time dealing with, for instance, I made a post on Facebook just about how sleepless I felt as a Black mother, worrying about my son, who is 17, rising senior, just like our first panelist. He's no longer in the cute phase, as people have been referring to, and just constantly worrying about him because he does feel invincible. And I know that the world views him as a threat. You know, they don't know him the way I know him and his family. And, you know, all they see is a threat. So I made that post on Facebook, and my aunt on the white side of the family, she thought she was making me feel better, but she made a comment that was essentially, oh, you don't have anything to worry about. And it just made me so upset that she didn't understand. And I was sitting here thinking, if I can't get my own family to understand what I'm so fearful of and that this is an issue, then how can we change the system? How can we get the government or, you know, these police departments or, you know, anyone to care? So that's something that I've been challenged with, is just dealing with those type of comments and people not really understanding what it feels like to be, you know, a Black parent and to have this fear for your child. The second thing that is challenging for me, and I'll illustrate it by this that happened recently. So, you know, my son volunteers a lot with me because volunteering is very important for me. So I manage our church's food pantry, and we were having a food drive in front of a grocery store. So I was one adult volunteer, and then one of the other brothers from our church was helping me. So a Black man. And Darian, you know, he's doing his thing, trying to approach people, and, you know, and hand them our flyer and say, can you donate food to the food pantry? And the other volunteer had to school him and say, Darian, you can't just pop up on people like that. You're Black, you're a Black man, you know, you're going to scare these white people. You just pop up, you know. And you know, something so mundane when we talk about, Black people just living their lives, our kids just trying to live their lives and explore themselves and show their interests. You know, I deal with a lot with trauma because I'm a social worker. And, you know, in any other context, when you're living in an environment where you always have to watch your back, where you have to shrink yourself, where you have to walk on eggshells, you know, to prevent abuse on you, that's an abusive relationship. And the position that it puts us in as Black parents is that we're supporting this abusive relationship because we're forced to tell our kids, no, you need to shrink down. You know, no, you can't look like this. You can't go around doing this. You can't do this. And that's the part I have a hard time dealing with, because as a parent, I have to correct my son to keep him safe. And I feel like I'm complicit in this abuse and this trauma that gets put on our kids. And I'm just wondering how other Black parents feel about that or deal with that.
Thank you, Katrina. Anyone, panelists or audience members who may want to respond or offer commentary?
I can respond.
Go for it.
So for me, my son is 17, and then I have one right behind him at 14, and then my baby girl. And let me just say to Mr. Williams, that intersectionality is a beast with the Black girls. And so I feel your pain there too. And it is true that we keep our eyes on the boys like that because they're the ones being targeted right now. But I'm sure if we could get some data on how many women have been victimized by the police, we might find some data on that too. But I think that, yes, we do. We do tell our boys, we do tell them to our children, we do tell them, you know, you have to wear the mask, you know, you have to stay alive. And so, you know, once they, I think, like Ms. Slade said, once they get out of our care, which is never, but kinda, once they leave the home and then they're adults, they have to navigate this. And the best thing you can do, it's just speaking from my own experience, the best thing you can do is just do your best to make sure that you prepared them as much as possible, because there is no magic wand to this. There is no manual for how you do this. And just when you think you told them the best way to stay out of trouble, they could get in trouble and it's not even their fault, just for just standing in the wrong place being Black. That can happen. And yes, it's scary. However, I have just decided that as long as you're with me, we will do whatever we have to do, because I want my son home more than I want his pride hurt right now. And that is a very hard thing to do, especially with boys. I have one who's very mouthy, and I have one who will go ahead and walk away and say, okay, I don't know how things would turn out with my mouthy one. I don't know how things will turn out with my one who walks away and says, okay, there is no magic pill for this. But we do. We participate in this little dance in society, and we make sure that our kids, at the expense of their lives, we have to show them how to navigate, how to learn these rules so they make it back home to us every night. I guess the bigger question is, I don't know if I'll ever know this, but how do they make it back to us every night? They may make it back, but what have they endured? What has happened to them? And how do they deal with that afterwards? And I guess, that's something that I'll be dealing with as well and continue to work through. But I do understand what you're saying. We do have to teach them how to learn these unspoken rules just so they can get home. And for me, seeing him come back is more important right now than if his feelings are hurt. That's just me.
Thank you, Robin. I see Tiffany's hand. Uh-oh. Tiffany, are you unmuted or frozen? I can't tell. You look frozen.
Okay.
Okay.
Am I there?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, Katrina, bruh, yeah, white supremacy is an abusive relationship. I mean, you really named it. And it's abusive in that it gaslights, right? So, yeah, even, it's the point of, and a lot of young activists have articulated it so well, it literally doesn't matter. It's up to how they feeling that day, how the cop is feeling that day, right? And in the 90s, it started with pull your pants up, and before then it was whatever, you say yes ma'am, no ma'am, whatever. And it doesn't matter. Amber said it doesn't matter what they wear, does not matter. Doesn't matter how sweet they are. This violin player who just who got killed last year that we didn't even know about until they're bringing the case back. And it's gaslighting in that Black people are told respectability, right? If we do this act, then there's a more likelihood that we could come home. And then when we teach that to our children, it's as acting as if we have any control in this situation. And so I don't know if any of you have seen, there's this, and Maria might know the actual title of it. Maria's my partner, and I think she's still on the call. Anyway, there's an Eyes on the Prize episode where, for you youngins, this is a documentary from back in the day about the standard civil rights movement. But there is this moment where SNCC activists are getting arrested, and there's this mom who, like, her son calls her and tells her that he's been arrested, and she's talking to the documentarian, and she's saying, crying, and she goes, yeah, my son just said, just be cool, Mom. Just be cool. And I'm trying to be cool. And she's like weeping, right? And she's like in this moment, and it's like captured on film, she's like, I want my child to be as free as he can be. And I am terrified. And so for me, I want my children to be good people. I want them to be nice. I want them to be respectful. I want them to be open-minded. And I also expect that there are some times when, as they get older, their expression of freedom is going to butt against my conservatism that comes with being a parent. And I hope that Maria and I hope that our community can tell me, be cool, Tiffany. Be cool, because I don't want to gaslight them. I do not want to act as if there is a playbook, and if they just follow that playbook, they'll be all right, because it's a lie. It is an absolute lie. And yeah, it's like what Amber said, that Krishana had said, it's about, like, my job is to show them negotiation. Because I do want it to change. And I mean, you know, like Minneapolis just defunding the police. Like, this is huge, you know? But yeah, like, sorry y'all, if you really think about Black Lives Matter, like what that means, and regardless of like what the pundits and all these like scared reactionaries like try to make it mean, and we see movement, right? Like literally, like public opinion polls are now saying like that more and more people are like the majority of Americans are like, no, our police are out of control, right? Like that's like huge movement on these young activists out there. And it is awe-inspiring to witness. But at the bottom line, Black Lives Matter, like, it's a win to be like, can you just understand that Black people just want to live? What the fuck, y'all? Like, literally, that's all it means, right? Like, how low of a bar is this United States that it is a radical, and the president talking about terrorism, just legit for people to say, I'm Black, will you let me live? That's what our children are growing up in. And I want them to like fight for more than that. And it terrifies me. But yeah, I expect them to be more radical than me. I mean, I hope so, because I want them to be as free as they possibly can be. That's it.
Oh, thank you, Tiffany. I think I see Katrina's hand. And right before we go back to Katrina, was there anyone else that had a question or a comment? I want to do a time, it is 7:15, and we were planning to disengage in this particular space around 7:15. I do want to say, because we respect your time, and Barbara's going to come and close us out in just a bit. If you need to depart, go in peace, go in love, and carry the things that people have shared in this space. Carry them out of this space. It's not confidential. Carry these things out of this space and give this information to people who are not here. So we respect that if you need to exit at this time. If not, we'll go for a few more minutes, and then Barbara will come in and close us out. Anyone else, and then we'll go back to Katrina if not.
I will say, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, Antoine and then Katrina. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't have like an answer for anything, but I will say that like I can tell like I've been conditioned to monitor my behavior. And the cool thing about being an artist is that like you hang around like all types of people. You hang around like various classes of people. And like I the only time I really like when I'm out in public, right? If we're not talking about police, right? I feel pretty like confident no one's going to bother me. But until like I'm around like white women, like in certain spaces, like I love Thin Mints. They are amazing. I love Girl Scout cookies. It horrifies me to go up to a group of white women with their little daughters and purchase those cookies. Like I remember like maybe a few months ago, and my daughter wanted some, and my wife likes them too. And I went and got some, but I'm like, I realized like these like 9 and 10-year-old girls can like easily get me murdered. Like it's like it's so easy, right? Like I understand when I interact with like specifically like white women, like how tense that relationship is, especially like out in public, right? Like and I understand like I have to like, you know, I got a kid now, right? Like I gotta make it back home, and it sucks. And I hate that like I'm looking out my window and seeing white people walk by. Like I look at that as like not like, yeah, like okay, if I go out there, I know I have to engage with these people a particular way because like they have maybe not physically, but like in society they hold so much more power than I do. Right. And like they can wield it if they need to. And it doesn't matter who I am and whether I'm right or wrong. And over time, no one sat me down to tell me this, right? It's something that I learned, you know? So, yeah.
If Katrina does not have one more thing, I will add something. It's interesting where we are with the conversation of respectability, politics, and things like that. We really are the first, in my opinion, the first generation of parents who are starting to have that conversation, at least for my 29-year-old brain. Somebody tell me I'm wrong. But I specifically remember, you know, my grandmother is 77 now, but as a kid, she just always felt like a younger grandmother. She was working, very like active out, and I would see her and she'd come home. And her name, and my cousin is on here. Her name is Dion. If y'all don't see, if you see a name you don't know, my grandmother's name on paper is Doris Ann. But family and Black people call her Darce, almost like Darse. And I remember being at the grocery store with her, and this white woman came up and called her Doris. And I looked at her. I said, "Why is she calling you that? That is not your name." I was probably like 10. She said, "Amber Slade, that is my name. Y'all just don't say it right." But that was really the first time I heard code switching. Mm-hmm. So she completely switched when she was speaking to this woman. She let her call her Doris. And I was like, what is this world that we just stepped into on aisle 7? And then I would hear and pick up on conversations about my family, my mother, my father, my grandmother coming home exhausted simply from being around white people all day. Because you have to put on a face. They were taught to be a good one, which we are now seeing is very, very toxic, because technically there are good people in the world, period. But there's always this expectation of, are you a nice Black person or are you one of those Black people? And we are trying really hard to change that narrative. And I'm glad you said it, Tiffany. Don't hear us say, oh, we don't like respectability politics, to make it sound like we don't want our children to say, yes and please. Of course we want all those things. But I think we are at the very end of shucking and jiving for white people. I remember being in a store with my mother, and she said, "I think I've reached my line." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she said it out of nowhere. I was very lost. She said, "I am so sick of making white people comfortable. All I'm doing is smiling all day. If I'm actually upset about something, I can't say nothing." She said, I hope you don't have to do this as long as I had to do it. And I'm grateful to work in a space. I actually started crying as soon as I looked down and saw Shannon Barr's face. Yes, I'm calling your name out, Shannon, because she's just so in touch, so aware. Her and Molly, like, they've made a professional world so different. And I pray my children get to be around that type of world. But sometimes we need reminders. The whole world is not Shannon and Molly. Period. Exclamation point, ... Prepare yourself. So suck it up while you can. Look, I'm crying thinking about it already. Like, I just want all of our children to be in spaces and surround themselves where they can be lifted up and safe in themselves, because it is dangerous to be Black. It is exhausting to be Black. And it's feeds back into that helplessness. Our parents used to be able to tell us, well, if you do this and you do that and you do that, you'll be okay. Deep down, they knew it wasn't true, but at least it was a try. It was a try. But now it's in our faces all day. It's not just on the news and you turn it off and it's a conversation at dinner. It's on the news, social media, you're getting notifications. It's in your face all day. And things have to change. They have to. Whether it's just in our homes first, the conversations that we're having with our children and allowing them to live authentically and not trying our best to just dress them up as good ones, because I can't.
Thank you, Amber. We're going to definitely close at 7:30. We have about 5 minutes, and that's probably time for just one more question or comment. And then Barbara will close us out.
Krishana, I have one more thing to say.
Yeah.
I think that this generation of child that's going through this particular time in history, I feel like this child is definitely not going to be like the children of old. And I think that we as I know for me, I grew up in a rural neighborhood where everybody knew everybody, and we had Black people on one side and white people on the other side. And we just knew you don't go on the other side of the street, and they didn't come on our side of the street. And so for me growing up, race was understood, always understood. And so we grew up with the Klan marching in our town. I mean, it was nothing for the Klan to show up. It was nothing for a cross to be burned in our neighborhood. So for me, race was very scary because they seemed to be the ones who could hurt us. But for some reason, our neighborhood, our village always made me feel like nothing was going to happen to me, even if they did come into our neighborhood. And they would do cowardly things like come in the middle of the night and burn a cross and do stuff like that. But they used to march openly all the time. And so, of course, I adopted some of those same, things that my parents had about race. You don't mix with white people, you don't do this, you don't do that. Some of those do's and don'ts. However, my children have grown up with all kinds of friends from Honduras, friends who are white, friends who are Asian. I mean, like my children are not growing up like me. And so I think that, number one, leads to some of their naivete about what can happen to them because they're hanging around people where this doesn't happen, so they think it won't happen to them. But I do think that it was important for me to let my children get involved in a protest, let my children see what that felt like. And I'm not saying everybody needs to do that, but let your children be a part of what is happening in whatever way you feel like is appropriate in your home and that they can understand. Because I just don't feel like my kids are going to live like we did. I know that I'm teaching them how to make it back home every day, but I think my mouthy one is going to be mouthy. And I think that hopefully I can teach him how to use that in a way where it doesn't, end his life. But I don't think that these kids who are witnessing this and watching this and hearing us talk about it in this way that we never have before, I don't think this generation is going to let it continue the way it has without a fight. And whatever that fight looks like, I don't know. But I just don't see the kids now who are marching and out in the streets and talking about it. I just don't see them letting it go and becoming invisible as some of our rules would have them do.
Yeah. Wow. So time is such a social construct. And at the same time, I know folks got stuff they got. This is all about parents, right? So I know there are things that need to happen in people's homes at 7:30 at night. But I really enjoyed you all tonight. Very difficult topic, sensitive topic, just hard. But you brought a lot of insights, and Katrina and our audience members as well. Just you brought a lot of insights, and those who are just hearing so much love and support, we appreciate it. I'm just going to stop there. I'll turn it over to Barbara.
Yes, thank you, Krishana. And thank you, Robin and Tiffany and Amber and Antoine for a wonderful, wonderful discussion. Thank you. I want you all to know that we appreciate you supporting our Real Talk series. For those of you that attended all three, we hope you enjoyed them and you got a lot out of it. We thank you for that. We are going to have these recordings available, particularly the one for this available, I think Roshana said over the next day or two, and we will make sure that you have access and a copy of each of these recordings. So I thank you. I want you all to please continue to fight for justice, continue to be out there fighting to end racism as best you can. And please stay safe. We appreciate you, and we hope to stay in community. Thank you. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lila.
Thank you.